Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, in which I post daily vlogs talking about whatever I want, and I try not to yawn because apparently I record these right when my body's like, hey, you're tired. And I'm like, no, I'm not. But my body's like, yeah, you are. Anyway, today I was going to talk about Banksy, but I am wanting to try and learn how to insert imagery in other videos into the recording, and it's already like 5:30 and it's going to take another like hour for me to render the video, upload it to YouTube, let YouTube process it, and get it all up. And I'm trying not to post at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, so it's going to be a tomorrow morning project. This is going to be good practice for the future. So today, instead, I thought I would talk about Jesus again, because I finally got a post up on Ex Christian that I'd been wanting to share for a while, because it was like, it was the one that's, oh, Jesus is actually kind of a dick. Um, and I had mentioned Ex Christian by name, the subreddit, not the person, whoever that might be. And I actually got some pretty interesting feedback from other people who wanted to comment about like Jesus the historical figure. And it's like, okay, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about trying to clarify. I was speaking specifically about the modern day interpretation of the Christian Jesus and not a potential historical figure. And then I started thinking about the fact that some people may think that Jesus just never existed at all, or he did exist, or don't know about the historical evidence behind the idea that there may be a actual figure that inspired Christianity. Um, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. How many times will I say in a sentence? So let's start with, was Jesus a real person? Well, it's complicated. The best way to determine if a person existed is to have multiple historical records. And I mean, around when Jesus would have been alive, there wasn't very much in the way of keeping track of peasants. And from what we know in the Bible, Jesus was born to a carpenter's like fiance turned wife, because virgin birth and all of that shit, virgin conception, whatever. Zeus came down in a golden rain. Mary got laid. Um, but so because he was born the son of a carpenter, there's not a whole lot of evidence of like where he would have been born. There's also not much evidence of Nazareth, where he would have been his birth town. So we then have to kind of look at the Bible as a primary source, because even though the earliest of the gospels that actually talk about his um the whole birth and crucifixion and his life and all of that stuff was actually written about 40 years after he was supposed to have died and be resurrected. So, yeah, it's not exactly contemporary with him, but in history, you kind of do the best you can. And for today, I'm using history.com to kind of help refresh my memory of exact names and things. Because, I mean, when you have a name like Flavius Josephus, I'm sorry if I butchered that. I'm sorry. How am I supposed to remember that from 2014 when I took philosophy and we tore apart Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code? Because that's when I started getting into the dissecting Jesus from a more scientific standpoint. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that class. Um, anyway, so who the fuck is Flavius Josephus? He was a Jewish historian in the first century. He wrote, I think he wrote a couple of different books, but the biggest one is Jewish Antiquities, which was like 20 plus volumes of work that just kind of went over all the history of the Jewish people. And according to history.com, this tome of work was written around 93 AD. So several decades after Jesus would have died. Um, Josephus was an aristocrat. He was like a military leader. Um, and he was not a Christian. He was Jewish. He was around for the early days of the church, though, because again, we're talking like this a few years after Jesus died to 93 AD. So, yeah, early church, he's aware of it. He has two mentions of a figure that could have been historically Jesus. One where they are talking about James, the brother of Jesus, who is called Messiah. And then there's another passage that describes a man who did surprising deeds and was condemned to death by Pontius Pilate. So those are two mentions from a respected historical author from near when Jesus was crucified. So that's cool. Then there is a Roman historian. His name is Tacitus. Lord. His name is Tacitus, and he also writes about how this person who he hated Christians. Like Romans just kind of hated Christians in general until like the emperor became Christian, and there was this whole thing about Rome getting split into two, and you had Constantinople as one of them, and I think that was the more Christian. Oh, it's been a while since I've studied ancient Roman history, and even then I studied it mostly through an art history lens, so the details are fuzzy for me. But Tacitus was a Roman historian. He did not like the Christians because they were fucking up things for Rome, and he wanted to write about stuff that was going on with the burning of Rome. He was contemporary with Emperor Nero, and Nero liked to blame the Christians for how Rome was burning, all this stuff. Nero was a fuck boy. Um, and Tacitus mentions that Christus was the founder of the Christians, and he had been put to death by Pontius Pilate, who had been in charge of like Judea, which is all that stuff. I also mentioned that this was all under the reign of Emperor Tiberius, so that's cool. I really love that. Yeah, so you have three sources. You have the Bible with the Gospels, which is really cool because three of the Gospels look like they were sourced from one document that's commonly called the Q document, and I believe Mark is the earliest Gospel to have been written down. And then Matthew was written with a historical document that is not the Q document, but a different one. So it's like you have these pieces of a puzzle, and people can tell because the stories are similar that three of the Gospels were from one of the Gospel was sourced from another one. So there's at least two source materials before that have been lost to time. It's really cool stuff. I love archaeology and forensics and all that sort of thing. But you have three sources of Jesus being a person who was alive and who ended up being killed by Pontius Pilate for being a bit of a revoltist. And that is the Bible with the Gospels, that is a Jewish historian, and that is a Roman historian, with the Roman and the Jewish historian having two different biases from the Bible, with the Roman really not liking Christians, and the Jewish, well, I don't know much about what Flavius thought of Jesus, but he was Jewish, he wasn't Christian, and he recorded Jewish history, so because Jesus was also a Jew, he was part of the historical evidence. So I believe that is most of it, and there is some stuff about like earlier than Tacitus. There's other Roman texts referencing Jesus, and but mostly it's all in connection of the Christians because the Christians are fucking annoying. They don't want to listen to the Roman emperor because the Roman emperor puts his face on the coins and all of this stuff. Anyway, but yeah, there's little tiny snippets, and it doesn't really tell us much about Jesus the person because again, he was a peasant, and in Roman sources especially, he's not really well liked. But it is pretty cool that you can see that there was a historical person that founded the church. At the very least, he thought that he was the Son of God. We don't know any of the specifics because got to take the Bible with a grain of salt, but he was a person, a historical person, and his name wasn't Jesus. It was probably something more like Yeshua, because this is also fun. I love history. So, Jewish, the Hebrew does not have the letter J. So, it's very likely that his name was more like Yeshua, which is Yeshua instead of Jesus, Jesus. And his name was Yeshua until the Gospels were written, because the Gospels and all of the works in the New Testament were written in Greek. Because if you remember, Paul, formerly Saul, his letters end up making the bulk of the New Testament after the Gospels. Though there is some doubt that he actually wrote all of the letters and that some of the letters might have been written by copycats and people who used him as an inspirational model. And it's also fun to note that Paul's letters, I believe, are considered to be earlier works than the Gospels. So you've got the Bible with the Old Testament being made up of oral tradition and stories and poems from Jewish history. And then you have the New Testament, and it's written in Greek, and you have these letters to the churches that are spreading around and becoming more prevalent in Roman culture, written by someone who is a convert, and then later on, the Gospels get put together. And again, these Gospels are probably also taken from oral tradition that's been passed down and been collected into at least two previous documents before being collated into what we know of as the Gospels in the New Testament today by God, I can't remember what it's called, but there was a sort of convention of Christian leaders very early on who ended up deciding what actually was going to be put in the Bible and what wasn't. And that's how you have things like the Gnostic Gospels that are some people like to consider as part of the canon, even though Christian leaders ages and ages and ages ago are like, no, we don't want this. And I'm kind of sad about it because some of the most fun stories about Jesus are from the Gnostic Gospels. Like in the Bible, we have very, very little about when Jesus was a child. We have like the temple where he went in on his own and he was left or something. I don't even remember the story very well because once you get past a certain age, you don't get taught that story. I think it was more taught to like 5th and 4th graders because, hey, look, Jesus was your age. Isn't he relatable? And I was like, whatever. But the Gnostic Gospels have some stories about how Jesus would get pissed off at kids and like strike them dead, got in an argument with his teacher, and the teacher would go to Joseph, and Joseph would be like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. And I feel so bad for Joseph in this because it's like, you're this kid's sort of earthly father. Does Jesus respect you because he knows that he's the Son of God? Or are you just like standing to one side being like, hey, Yeshua, can you stop killing the children? Can you stop killing? Okay, you're going to keep doing it. If I try to fight you, you might turn me to stone as well. Okay. Joseph had a hard life raising this kid that wasn't his. And baby Jesus had a temper. He did bring everyone back to life at the end, though, so, he's got to have a slightly clean record. But There's fascinating stories in the Gnostic Gospels, and I may have to do more research and talk about them in the future because it's just fun. Kind of like how watching Lucifer, and despite my frustration with the unending sexual tension between the two main leads because they won't just let them be happy for 5 minutes, I find myself enjoying the story more than I might have as a Christian because I can look at Christianity as just another mythology to have fun with. Anyway, so we were talking about Jesus' real name, Yeshua. So, Jewish texts were written in Hebrew, and they don't have a J, so they would have used a Y. When it got translated into Greek, Greek doesn't have the sh sound, so it would have been written more like, when I see it on the screen, it looks like Lysis. The first letter might be an L, it might be an I, it might be just a representation of a Greek letter that I don't know because I'm reading all of this in English because despite my childhood fascination with apologetics, I never got very far in learning any of the original Greek or Hebrew. My term in apologetics lasted all of like 3 years, so anyway, so it got translated into Greek, into like this Jesus, or yeah, I'm gonna say Jesus for now, and it got translated into Latin because that's how the Catholic Church rolled. Because it's interesting because before reading was so prevalent and the Gutenberg press made it easier for large texts like the Bible to be passed around, Latin was the common language to use. And a really fun fact is they would have the Bible in the church and it'd be open to a page. And one of the reasons why you see these pictures on the pages, like in the corners and all around, and have big, beautiful illustrations, was to kind of help show the story that was on that page so the people that couldn't read could go in and look at the pictures, and then on their mass they would then listen to everything in Latin and I guess just kind of have good vibes or something. So interesting fact about that. um so anyway, it gets translated to Latin, and then people aren't really sure why the first letter changed to a J. It's thought that it might have been a Swiss thing, might have been a German thing, but eventually there was a translation that switched the first letter to a J, and it got popularized through the Geneva Bible. So you end up going from Yeshua, a very common Jewish name, and he would have been called something like, I'm sorry, I want to butcher this, Yeshua bar Josephus, because Joseph, there's not a J in Hebrew, so Josephus. So he went from Yeshua bar Josephus to Jesus Christ. And that's kind of how I separate the two. Is there is Yeshua, who was a person who was killed by the Romans for some reason, for causing dissent, for the claims that he was doing remarkable deeds, and also for like causing a ruckus in the temples, all of that. He was a real person, it looks like. But then there is Jesus Christ, our brown-haired, green-eyed Savior, who is very, very white. And I look at the two and I don't judge Yeshua because I don't know him. We don't have enough information about him, and besides all of that, he lived like 2,000 years before us. It's 2021. He died in like 2030 or something like that. I don't remember the exact date, but he died young, relatively. And he died in a world that is completely different from ours. I mean, we're talking about Roman Empire, Greek having the idea that women are incomplete men, all of that fun stuff. Uh, so I can't judge him on modern standards because if he had been born in 1993, he would probably be a completely different person. Just like if I had been born in like 01 AD, I would be a completely different person. I probably wouldn't even be alive, to be honest. Because the whole being trans thing, I don't think it would have been looked on as very good unless I could successfully hide it. Um, but Jesus Christ, he has been a figure that has been constantly interpreted through the ages. And I feel like I can judge him because in modern day interpretations, you still have pastors and priests and other authority figures in the Catholic and Protestant churches defending the actions that have been done in the name of God. So, like the Holy Crusades, they are still excused in modern debate by some Christians because it kept the Muslims from taking over. So, I feel like I can judge those actions based off of modern day interpretations because they're being interpreted by other people by their modern standards. Um, so when I say Jesus Christ, I'm talking about this figurehead of Jesus, of the church. I'm not talking about a historical figure. I'm talking about the ideology that has been built up by people that taught me, by myself, by everything around us, and not the historical man. I hope that makes sense. I just wanted to have some fun, refresh my memory on some of the historical texts, just share with you guys some of the stuff I really love learning about, like the idea of early historians as far back as the first century AD. And you think about the first century AD and you're just like, Jesus Christ. um, what did they have to write about? They had a lot to write about. The world was being made. And I don't know, that stuff is fascinating to me. Uh, Much more so than any modern war or anything, I suppose. Yeah, give me that ancient text. Give me the historians that are recording things in the first century AD. I don't care about the wars. I don't care about fucking Nero and his insanity. Though I will talk about it at some point. I wrote a paper about like how Apollo was used by Romans, Roman patriarchy, and the Roman emperor as a sort of stand-in to try and make themselves seem more authentic. I also wrote about how Apollo came from earlier gods and that sort of thing. I have a thing for Apollo. Sue me. Um, but I think that's going to be it for today. I am going to talk about Banksy tomorrow. I have been stalling a bit on some of my artwork, but I need to. God, tomorrow's going to be busy. I'm running a workshop for teens. I think I've mentioned it before, and tomorrow's going to be a meeting, and we're going to be going over the budget and everything. And I'm just like, cool. I know nothing. Let's get into it. I hope y'all are having a good day. Like I said, mine's been pretty busy. And everyone stay hydrated. Keep y'all healthy. I'm going to get some water before I start putting all this together. And I'll see y'all tomorrow to talk about one of my least favorite artists. Bye.